Hello everyone, welcome back to the session. So in today's class we are going to discuss about the breathing and exchange of gases. Okay, so and this is in this chapter we are going to discuss about the short answer questions. Okay, in the second year, right? So the first question will be the explain the process of inspiration and expiration under normal conditions. Okay, so inspiration is an active process, which means active process in the sense there has to be the involvement of certain important muscles. Okay, so inspiration is nothing but inhalation. Okay, inhalation of air, okay, of atmospheric air. So that is an active process. So the contraction of diaphragm and external intercostal muscles. Okay, so this is an inspiration process. Okay, so diaphragm has to be contracted, and the external intercostal muscles, there has to be an involvement of external intercostal muscles in case of inspiration. Okay, so whenever there is a contraction of diaphragm is taking place, diaphragm moves downward. Okay, whenever the diaphragm is moving downward, that is the thoracic volume is getting increases. Okay, is getting increased in the anterior posterior axis, which means like this, the top to bottom. So anterior posterior axis will get increases. The external intercostal muscles, this is the muscle which is involving in lifting the ribs as well as the sternum. As it is lifting the ribs and the sternum, there is an increasing in the thoracic volume in the dorsoventral axis. Finally, the thoracic volume has to get increased. Definitely that has to be increased, but for that increases the thoracic volume increasing, there is an involvement of diaphragm as well as the external intercostal muscles. Okay, so there is a pulmonary volume, it is increasing. The intrapulmonary pressure falls below the atmospheric pressure. See, the pulmonary volume means this is the volume which is present in the lungs. Okay, so whenever the air is entering inside, the volume of the lung is getting increases. Okay, the intrapulmonary pressure falls below the atmospheric pressure. See, whenever the pressure is getting higher, which means the flow of wind has been determined by the pressure. Always the wind will be flow from the higher pressure to the lowest pressure. Okay, so as there is a lower pressure feeling in the lungs, that is why the air which is present in the atmosphere, okay, which is entering into the lungs. Why? Because lungs is experiencing a lower pressure. There is a lower pressure, and in the atmosphere there is a higher pressure. Okay, so that is why the air is entering from the higher pressure to the lower pressure, which means from the atmosphere to the lungs. So this process is called as the inspiration. So whenever the inspiration is taking place, you should know there is an involvement of diaphragm as well as the external intercostal muscles. This is the first important thing. And the second thing will be the diaphragm. There is an involvement of these two important parts, and the diaphragm is moving downward. As it is moving downward, this is increasing the thoracic volume in the anterior posterior axis, but in the dorsoventral axis they are increasing in the thoracic volume is getting increased in the dorsoventral axis, that is upper and lower side, that has been determined by the external intercostal muscles. Okay, so now comes to the pressure. Okay, so the first thing will be the involvement of diaphragm and external intercostal muscles, and we have studied which is increasing the thoracic volume in which axis. And the third important thing will be the pressure. Okay, whenever the air is entering into the lungs, we are calling them as the inspiration. Whenever the inspiration is taking place, always the wind has to flow from higher pressure to the lower pressure. Now here in the inspiration, the air is coming from the atmosphere to the lungs, which means you should know that in the lungs the pressure is very low. Okay, so the air enters into the lungs due to the pressure difference. Okay, the air enters the lung due to the pressure difference. So the main important thing will be here is the pressure. Okay, now Expiration. Now we have studied that inspiration is an active process, inspiration is an active process, and expiration is the passive process. Okay, so the reason now the diaphragm and external intercostal muscles is getting relaxed. Okay, so the diaphragm and the external intercostal muscles is getting relaxed, and thoracic and pulmonary volumes is decreases. So now just opposite, all the scenarios are just opposite to the inspiration. Okay, thoracic and pulmonary volume is getting decreases. Right, now the intrapulmonary pressure rises above the atmospheric pressure. Now here the lung experience they are having a higher pressure, and from the higher pressure, which means what, the lung is getting full of air now. Okay, that has to be expelled. Okay, so from the higher pressure the air has to be enter into the atmosphere. Okay, so this is what the intrapulmonary pressure rises above the atmospheric pressure. The air is expelled from the lungs. So this particular scenario is, we are calling that as a expiration, which is a passive process. Okay, so there the diaphragm and the external intercostal muscles is getting contracted, but here is getting decreases. There in the inspiration the thoracic and pulmonary volumes increases, and here it will be decreases. Okay, here the intrapulmonary pressure is getting increases when compared to the atmospheric pressure. Okay, now that's all about the first question, which means the process of inspiration and expiration, say there is no specific condition. Okay, so under which condition which has to be taking place. Here they didn't mention any specific conditions, only the normal condition. So this answer is sufficient. Okay, so now second question will be the what are the major transport mechanism for carbon dioxide? Explain. Okay, so the carbon dioxide is transported from the tissues to the lungs. See, we are taking the atmospheric air into the lungs, isn't it? This is how it will be. And the atmospheric air not only contains oxygen but also the nitrogen gases, sulfur gases, carbon dioxide and oxygen gases, all has to be present in the atmospheric gases. Okay, now all the gases has to be enter into the lungs. The lungs now segregating the oxygen. Now the oxygen is reaching all the parts of the body. Okay, specifically the cells. Okay, now the cells, as a result of the metabolism, they are excreting the eliminate byproduct which is called as the carbon dioxide, and this carbon dioxide has to be eliminated from the body. Okay, so carbon dioxide from the tissues to the lungs in three main ways. Okay, so the before that the cells, the group of cells, we are calling them as a tissues. Now from the tissues the carbon dioxide has to be entered into the lungs. Only then the lungs which has the carbon dioxide has been expelled out in the process of expiration. Okay, so how that has been possible in three different ways. And the first ways will be the carbon dioxide which are dissolving in the plasma. Another important thing will be how many percentage of carbon dioxide is dissolving in the plasma, and that is the 7%. Okay, 7% of carbon dioxide is physically dissolved in the plasma, and this is the most important point. Okay, now, and some carbon dioxide is going to react with the water, and as they are mixing with the water, they are forming the H2CO3. Okay, H2CO3. Now this is what dissolved in plasma. So carbon dioxide is dissolving in the plasma and as carbamino compounds. Okay, which means 20 to 25% of carbon dioxide is bind with the amino groups of hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is a protein, and protein is made up of amino acids. Okay, so now this carbon dioxide is bind with the amino acids of the hemoglobin, so that is why we are calling them as the carbamino hemoglobin. Carbon dioxide is binding with the amino acid present in the hemoglobin, so that is why we are calling them as a carbamino hemoglobin. Okay, so that is nothing but hemoglobin, that is Hb, NH2, CO2. So that we can see this Hb, NHCOO plus H plus. Okay, so this is how the reaction is taking place, right? The binding depends on the partial pressure of the carbon dioxide and oxygen. As we have mentioned before in the long answer questions, The binding carbon dioxide as well as the oxygen both has the capacity to bind with the hemoglobin. Okay, and who is the deciding factor who has to bind with the hemoglobin is the partial pressure of which gases, which means the concentration. Okay, whichever the partial, if the partial pressure of oxygen is high, oxygen is going to bind with the hemoglobin. If the partial pressure of carbon dioxide is high, it is going to bind with the hemoglobin. So that is the deciding factor for the binding with the hemoglobin. So that is why we can easily say that in the tissues the concentration, the partial pressure of carbon dioxide is high, so carbon dioxide will be bind with the hemoglobin. Okay, so in the lungs partial pressure of oxygen is higher, so that it will be bind with the hemoglobin. Okay, so this is what an important thing I have mentioned in the form of equation. Now, carbon dioxide can also bind with the plasma proteins. Okay, so the first thing, it can be the carbon dioxide will be dissolved in the plasma in the bicarbonate ions. Okay, and in the as carbamino compounds, which means amino acids present in the hemoglobin, it is going to bind with, and that percentage will be 20 to 25%, right? Now, as bicarbonate ions, okay, so here it will be whenever this carbon dioxide is mixed with the water, they are forming the carbonic acid. Okay, but here HCO3 is a bicarbonate. So carbon dioxide in the plasma, they are going to dissolve in the plasma. Second one will be that has been transported in the form of carbaminohemoglobin, and the third one will be it is going to convert in the form of bicarbonates. It is maintaining as a buffer. Okay, so that is why the pH of the blood will be slightly basic, slightly acidic, which means it is neutral, right? So about 70% of carbon dioxide is transported as bicarbonate. So we have studied that 7% of carbon dioxide will be dissolved in the plasma, and 20 to 25% will be in the form of carbaminohemoglobin, and remaining 70% of carbon dioxide will be in the form of, is transported in the form of bicarbonate. Okay. See, we have discussed that carbon dioxide, whenever it is mixing with the water, they are producing the carbonic acid. Okay, now this carbonic acid is splitting into this H plus and HCO3 minus. HCO3 minus is nothing but a bicarbonate. So how this reaction is possible? Because of the presence of the carbonic anhydrase enzyme. So this is the enzyme, carbonic anhydrase enzyme is an enzyme which is converting this carbon dioxide and water into carbonic acid. Okay, so in the tissues, how it is in the tissues? It is in the lungs. In the tissues, the carbon dioxide diffuses into the blood. Okay, at the tissues, the hemoglobin is picking up the carbon dioxide and it is that is what diffuses into the blood. There they are forming the bicarbonates for the transport. Okay, so at lungs the reaction reverses carbon dioxide released for the exhalation, right? So here lungs, the carbon dioxide is coming out from the body. Okay, so this is what a transport mechanisms for the carbon dioxide. Okay, so this is the most important thing. Okay, now how is the respiratory movements regulated in the man? How the respiratory movements is regulated in the man? The first step, the respiratory rhythm center, that is medulla. Okay, so the respiratory rhythm center, so this is considered as a medulla, so this is very important point. Okay, so the primary control of respiratory movements. Okay, so the respiratory rhythm center is a medulla, which is considered as a medulla. So here it is this is the primary control of respiratory movements, whether the inspiration has to take in place or the expiration has to take in place, that has to be, the signal has been sent from the medulla. Okay, because that is considered as a primary rhythm center, primary respiratory rhythm center. Now the second important thing will be the pneumotaxic center, which is present in the pons. Okay, so here it is moderating the rhythm center. Shorten inspiration alters the respiratory rate. Okay, as the inspiration is getting shorter, it is altering the respiratory rate. So the pneumotaxic center, it is present in the pons. Okay, the respiratory rhythm center is present in the medulla. Okay, so the chemosensitive area, so that is present near the medulla. This is sensitive to carbon dioxide and H plus. Okay, the chemosensitive area which is present in near the medulla, that is sensitive to the carbon dioxide as well as the H plus. Okay, so which means what, whenever the concentration of carbon dioxide is higher, whenever the concentration of H plus ions is higher, there is an area which is present in the medulla which is getting activated. So that is what I have mentioned here, high CO2. Okay, so carbon dioxide concentration is higher and the H plus concentration is also higher. Okay, so this is the one now activating the rhythm center. This is the one activating the rhythm center, increases the rate and depth of the breathing. Okay, so this is an important thing. So the respiratory movements, first the medulla, in the medulla they are having the respiratory rhythm center. So that is the one primary control of respiratory movements will be in the medulla, and the pneumotaxic center which is present in the pons, that is maintaining the rhythm center. Okay, as the inspiration is getting shorter, it is altering the respiratory rate. And the chemosensitive area, which means they are sensitive to the area particularly which is located in the medulla, they are more sensitive to the carbon dioxide and H plus. Okay, they are sensitive to the carbon dioxide and the H plus. Okay, they are the one activating the rhythm center. They are increasing the rate and depth of the breathing. Okay, whether we have to inhale very long or very short duration, that will be decided by this chemosensitive area. Again, that will be present near the medulla. Okay, so now the fourth important thing will be this peripheral chemoreceptors. Peripheral chemoreceptors, they are nothing but an aortic arch and the carotid artery. Okay, aortic arch and the carotid artery. See, this peripheral chemoreceptors, which means they are detect changes in the carbon dioxide and H plus. Again, see this carbon dioxide. Why we are saying this carbon dioxide and H plus are the sensitive to all these areas means, see, if the carbon dioxide concentration is very higher in our body, that has to be eliminated immediately from our body. Okay, our body should not allow these gases to accumulate more. Okay, so that is why all these areas are very sensitive to this particular carbon dioxide and oxygen and this H plus. So send signals to the rhythm center for adjustments, because all the cells are in need of this oxygen only. So that is why the see, in the cells there is a removal of carbon dioxide. So in the cells there is a removal of this carbon dioxide. So this carbon dioxide, all the cells in our body, as a result of the metabolism, they are going to remove the carbon dioxide. As the partial pressure of carbon dioxide is higher, whenever the concentration of this carbon dioxide is higher, so these signals or send signals to the rhythm center for adjustments which is present in the medulla. Okay, now oxygen, okay, plays a minor role in regulating the respiration, which means we know that all the respiratory pathways from the oxygen which is present in the lungs, that will be taken to all parts of the body. Okay, so now the important question will be the distinguish between all these IRV versus ERV, which means inspiratory reserve volume and expiratory reserve volume. Okay, so inspiratory reserve volume, which means what? See, the inspiratory reserve volume in the sense maximum air that can be inhaled after normal inspiration. See, say for an example, now you are doing something. Okay, so you are inhaling the air and exhaling the air normally. Okay, you are inhaling and you are exhaling. This is the normal process, and this is called as a tidal volume. Okay, now what is inspiratory reserve volume? Inspiratory reserve volume in the sense the normal air, beyond the normal air, whenever we are doing some yoga or meditation, we are inhaling some extra air. Even after the normal inspiration, we are inhaling some extra air, that is called as a inspiratory reserve volume. Okay, so that will accounts for this. It will be around 2500 to 3000 ml. An expiratory reserve volume in the sense maximum air that can be exhaled after the normal expiration about 1000 to 1100 ml. So just listen to me. So if we are inhaling normally, we are inhaling and we are exhaling, that will be the normal inspiration, normal expiration. Okay, so if we are inhaling the air after normal inspiration, okay, we are inhaling forcefully, forceful inspiration, that is called as an inspiratory reserve volume. Okay, now after normal expiration, we are exhaling the maximum amount of air, that is forcible expiration, that is called as a expiratory reserve volume. So the ml, that will be accounts for this 2500 to 3000 in case of inspiratory reserve volume, and 1000 to 1100 ml in case of the expiratory reserve volume. Okay, and the second difference will be this inspiratory capacity versus the expiratory capacity. Okay, so the inspiratory capacity in the sense total air that can be inhaled after normal expiration, and see the total air. Inspiratory capacity in the sense you should know that. So we are normally inhaling the air like normal inspiration. Even after the normal inspiration, we are forcefully inspiring the air. Okay, extra air, forceful inspiration. So what will be the capacity of our lungs to hold this inspiratory capacity in the sense? So that is called as an inspiratory capacity, which means the tidal volume. That is nothing but a normal inspiration. Okay. After the normal inspiration, our lung has the capacity to inhale some extra air. So that is what an inspiratory reserve volume. So this tidal volume plus the inspiratory reserve volume, so that is called as the inspiratory capacity. So that accounts for the 3000 to 3500 ml. Okay. Now the expiratory capacity, the total air that can be exhaled after normal inspiration. Okay, so after normal inspiration, what will be the total amount of air that I can be exhaled? Okay, so that is called as an expiratory capacity. Okay, so expiratory capacity is equal to that is the tidal volume, which means a normal expiration. Even after the normal expiration, we are forcefully exhaling some extra amount of air, that is called as an expiratory reserve volume. So whenever we are adding this tidal volume and expiratory reserve volume, we are calling this particular term capacity as an expiratory capacity. Okay, and what will be the capacity? That in numbers we can say that as an 1500 to 1600 ml. Okay, so this is what a difference between the inspiratory capacity and the expiratory capacity. Inspiratory capacity in the sense tidal volume plus the inspiratory reserve volume. Expiratory capacity in the sense tidal volume plus the expiratory reserve volume. So this is what the difference between them. Now the difference between this vital capacity and the total lung capacity. Okay, so the vital capacity will be the total capacity, which means maximum amount of air exhaled after the maximum inhalation, which means we can add here a tidal volume plus inspiratory reserve volume plus the expiratory reserve volume. Okay, so see the maximum air exhaled. Okay, here the vital capacity after a maximum inhalation, what are all the air we are exhaling? So this is what a vital capacity of the lung. Okay, see maximum air after maximum inhalation, maximum air exhaled, how much amount of air we are exhaling after the maximum inhalation. Here maximum inhalation will be this tidal volume and the inspiratory reserve volume and the expiratory reserve volume. Okay, so we are exhaling all these air whenever after the maximum inhalation. So this is what a vital capacity. The major difference between this vital capacity and the total lung capacity, this is an important thing. Okay, see in the vital capacity we can add this IRV plus ERV, inspiratory reserve volume and expiratory reserve volume plus tidal volume. And in the total lung capacity, we are going to add this IRV plus ERV, inspiratory reserve volume, expiratory reserve volume, and residual volume, and the tidal volume. So if we include this residual volume, we are calling them as the total lung capacity. If we are adding this IRV, ERV and tidal volume, we are calling that particular term, that particular capacity as the vital capacity. Okay, so this is an important thing. Okay, so this is the total lung capacity. What will be the total capacity of our total lung? Okay, so total air present in the lungs, which is present in the lungs after forced inhalation. What are all the air which is present in our lung? Okay, so we are calling that particular term as the total lung capacity. Okay, so you should know what is the IRV and what is ERV. Okay, and tidal volume is nothing but normal inspiration and normal expiration. That is what a tidal volume. And inspiratory reserve volume after a normal inhalation, for normal inspiration plus forceful inspiration, we are calling them as the inspiratory reserve volume. Normal exhalation, forceful exhalation, that is called as the expiratory reserve capacity. If we add all these three, we are saying that as a vital capacity. Together with all these three things, if we add the residual volume, we are calling them that particular capacity as a total lung capacity. Okay. Now, so the next question will be the disorders of the respiratory system. What are all the disorders? So the first disorder will be the asthma, emphysema, bronchitis, and the pneumonia and chronic obstructive pulmonary diseases and occupational respiratory diseases. Okay, so these are all the disorders of the respiratory system. So the first disorder will be the asthma. Okay, so asthma always involves the bronchi and bronchioles. They are getting bulged. That is what an inflammation which is present in the bronchi and bronchioles. Why this inflammation is taking place? Because of the allergens. Okay, because of the allergens in the sense a substance which is causing the allergy is called as an allergens. Okay, so those allergens which are releasing the histamine, as it is releasing all these more allergens, more histamine, this leads to inflammation of bronchi and bronchioles. Now, what will be the effect? As it is this is a cause, and now the spasm of smooth muscles, the narrowed airways, the airways is getting narrowed, so the enough air, it is not enough oxygen, it is not going to reach all these things. Okay, so enough air, it is not reaching the all the parts of the body, so that is why we are saying that as the narrowed airways. Okay, so now what are all the symptoms? So the symptoms will be the coughing, wheezing and difficulty in breathing. Okay, so this asthma, that is coughing, this the symptom of this asthma, we know that asthma patients, we can come across those patients, they will often cough, wheezing, difficulty in breathing. So these are all the things. Okay, so this is what an asthma. And the second respiratory disorder will be the emphysema. Okay, and emphysema, this is the cause, a damage and the coalescence of the alveolar walls, which means this emphysema is a condition, those people who are getting addicted to smoking, who are a chain smoker, definitely they will experience this emphysema in the later conditions. Okay, so what will be the effect? Fever, larger alveoli, decreased respiratory surface area, the lungs becomes less elastic. Okay, so these are all the symptoms of the emphysema. Third disorder will be the bronchitis. So the bronchitis will be the bronchi is getting inflamed. Okay, so the inflammation of this bronchi, and what will be the effect? Swollen mucus lining, increased mucus and narrowed bronchi. These are all the effects of this bronchitis. And the symptoms are the chronic cough with thick sputum. Okay, so the symptom will be the chronic cough with thick sputum, will means the mucus is also getting released along with this. Okay, now The pneumonia. So pneumonia is usually infected by the bacteria, and the name of the bacteria will be the streptococcal pneumoniae. Okay, streptococcal pneumoniae, and it is not only by the bacteria but also will be the virus, fungi, and protozoans. Okay, so why it can be caused by all the microorganisms in the sense they are going to affect the lungs. Lung is getting inflamed. Okay, so as the lungs is getting inflamed, it leads to the mucus accumulation, impaired gas exchange. As the mucus is getting accumulated in all parts of our lungs, the enough exchange of gases in the alveolar sacs will not taking place. So as a result, it results in the pneumonia, difficulty in breathing. Okay, it may be very fatal. Okay, it leads to death if it is untreated. Now, COPD, which means chronic obstructive pulmonary diseases. Okay, so these emphysema, chronic bronchitis, asthma, they were collectively called as the chronic obstructive pulmonary disorder. And what are all the occupational respiratory disorders? But before that, what is mean by occupational respiratory disorders? They were in the sense, if a person is working in the hazardous area, okay, so if the person is working in the factories where it is rich in the pollution, okay, so it is called as the occupational respiratory disorders. Asbestosis, okay, due to the asbestos dust exposure, the dust may affect the lungs. Okay, silicosis, silica dust exposure, the person who keep on exposing to the silicon dust, it may in the mining and the quarries, those people will definitely experience with this silicosis. Sidrosis, due to the iron particle deposition, includes the pneumoconiosis, so hyperferemia and hemosidrosis. So these are all the iron particle. So this sidron will be the iron ore. Okay, so that is why the disease sidrosis. Black lung disease, this is called the coal dust inhalation. It is specifically in the miners. Okay, so these are all the short answer question we have studied in this breathing and exchange of gases in the second year. Okay, so in the next class I'll meet you with the next chapter. Thank you so much.